course, the varnish. How has no one asked about varnish yet? Because everybody thinks, oh, that's the secret, you know, they've talked about it for ever and ever. The formulas left over from
well, you put
Stradivari.
blood in the varnish and
Yeah,
that makes
right.
it better.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
What shall I can talk for hours about that, because we have met, or actually, we have met for the first time 12 years ago in Puerto Rico on a very important convention on violin varnish.
Can we just talk about varnish?
We were over 100 violin makers from all over the world in Puerto Rico, this incredible place. I didn't care about the beach. I was just talking about it.
Sure.
And we've been talking for days and days just about the varnish. Now the story is this. When Andrea Amati, around 1540, made his instruments, he varnished them with the most beautiful varnish that we know, and which we can still admire. It's still on these instruments. If you look at these instruments in Cremona, in the City Hall, we have a violin from 1566, one of these instruments made for the French court, and we can still admire the varnish of that beautiful violin. But if we go in the Cathedral of Cremona, that's the tower, but on the right you see a little white part. Well, that's the beginning of the facade of the cathedral. If you go in the building there, apart from the beautiful frescoes, behind the altar there is the chorus, which is the half-round structure of wood in which all the members of the choir were sitting when they were singing for the Mass. That piece of furniture was made in the same period of the instruments of Andrea Amati, and is varnished with the same varnish. So when I sing in the cathedral choir, I sit on this beautiful chorus, and I'm just so scared because I feel like I'm sitting on the violin of Amati. It's really, I mean, it's true. You won't believe it. Why am I saying this? The varnish was not made by the violin makers themselves. It was made by the pharmacists. There were guilds that stated the rules for the materials and the techniques in the crafts. So violin makers could buy and work with all the wooden materials, but they did not have the opportunity, they were not allowed to buy the oils and the resins necessary to make the varnishes. So there were the varnish makers, so-called. And that has been going on for centuries and centuries. Stradivari was actually the first person to add color aspects to the varnish. So he added pigments to it. Around 1700 he started making his first instruments with a nice warm red-brown varnish. The Amatis only used the varnish, or actually the color of the varnish by Amati was only due to the resins itself. There were no pigments in there. In fact, the cello that we have in the City Hall collection, the Cristiani cello, with a very nice dark red-brown, you can see the pieces of pigment sitting in it. Now, why at a certain point the varnish of Cremona violin makers changed? Because when Stradivari died, Guarneri died, the other great makers disappeared. At a certain point, we see that the Cremona instruments were varnished with other kinds of varnish. Storioni was one of the first makers using that varnish, and Cerruti also. This is the so-called spirit varnish, which has been used ever since. The reason is, first, because it was a modern invention, and the violin makers and also the furniture makers believed it was an improvement. It was a harder varnish. But they didn't realize then that the violin didn't need a harder varnish, because the violin needs to vibrate. It's not a table, it's not a chair. And the second reason is that the last varnish maker died. He died around 1749. And in fact, after that date, we have no other violins varnished with the beautiful oil varnish from the period of Stradivari. So for many centuries, people have been varnishing their instrument with spirit varnish. Until halfway 1900, when people started to get interested again in the original oil varnishes. And they have started to do archive research and found back the old recipes. And now today we have got again varnish makers, people just only boiling the oils and the resins, putting them together. We can do that personally also, but it's very dangerous. You know, standing there in the courtyard with very stinky linseed oil, 400 degrees centigrade, and it can explode, it's terrible. So we prefer getting it made by professional varnish makers, and that is what we have been talking about in the conference. But the history of varnish is very interesting. There's no secrets.
Talking about making varnish, I have met a gentleman, violin maker in Germany. I don't know if you know this guy, who would burn his face was burned, and because while he's making varnish.
Had an accident. Dangerous time.
That is one of the reasons why these guilds are so strict. Security, but also not to ruin the market, not to ruin the commerce. To get the good products, you need the professionals. Today's we don't have these rules anymore. In fact, a lot of this knowledge is gone. But in violin making, we are very lucky. There's still a lot of knowledge and a lot of research, a lot of archival research. But now we are using again the old oil varnish.